Hi everybody, Morena. Hope you're all good and safe in your lockdown bubbles. It's a strange time for us at the moment, but at least we can make use of this time with upskilling. I don't know if you watched my webinar last Monday. So we did a webinar on skin barrier function, and a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today will refer back to that webinar, so that if you haven't watched it, the girls will put that link up in the chat so that you can access it, because of course the skin microbiome, which is our subject today, is linked with our skin barrier function. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to come in and sit down and get organised. To start with, what I might do is just introduce myself. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Janine Tait. I'm a beauty therapist. I've had 35 years experience in the industry. I'm a qualified nutritionist, and I'm also the founder of Bestow Beauty. So Bestow Beauty is my brand, and it is a range of superfoods that are designed to treat the skin from the inside. So let's get started. So today our subject is the gut microbiome and the skin microbiome. So it's a really exciting area of research, and I love learning about it. It's constantly changing, and the advances that we have in genome sequencing and our increased software capabilities are meaning that we can really drill down on this invisible world. And it's really changing our perception about bugs. I think since the mid 1800s, when it was first discovered that bugs were largely responsible for disease, then this really meant that we have for a long time thought that bugs should be avoided at all costs and that they're very bad things. But in actual fact, out of the trillions and trillions of microbes that exist on this earth, less than 0.1% are actually a threat to our health. The rest of them are either harmless or they're beneficial. And they do amazing things for our environment, and they allow human beings to survive and even thrive on this planet. So some of the things that microbes do: they're our number one recycler of nutrients. So if a plant or an animal dies, microbes are the ones that are responsible to break down and release those nutrients back into that ecosystem. They also can break down rock over millennia and release the minerals into our soils. They form these incredible partnerships with plants as well. So your house plants and your plants outside, they will have millions of little microbes surrounding their roots, and the plants will actively feed these microbes because the microbes in return will strengthen the plant's immunity. And about 2 years ago, I read this really interesting book called The Hidden Life of Trees. And in it, they were talking about these massive networks of fungi that live in the soil underneath the forests. And these networks of fungi would go for kilometers, and they allowed trees to communicate with each other, and they could warn each other of pests or disease. And these fungi even enabled the transfer of nutrients. So if a tree was sick and struggling, the other trees could help support it. And so these little microbes would allow these trees to collaborate. And I just think that's so incredible. And of course, for human beings, they form this beautiful, beneficial relationship with us. Now, as I say, this is constantly moving, this research. So, of course, I knew that we were doing this webinar, and I've just refreshed my knowledge. And the latest statistics are, or the latest numbers are, that there's something like 38 trillion microbes that live on or in your body. So 38 trillion little microbes are living on your body or in your body right at this moment. And individually, of course, they are invisible to the naked eye, but collectively, they contribute to 2 kilograms of your total weight. So that's just amazing. And they're really, really important for us. Now, before we go too far, I want to just define the word microbiome. So if we break it into two parts, micro, of course, meaning too tiny to see, so that's referring to the microbes, and biome is simply a place that a population has decided to make its home. So in the case of skin microbiome, it's the little microbes that have decided to make the skin their home. And on our bodies, and in our bodies, we have three major microbiomes. We have our skin microbiome, which is quite a unique microbiome. It is quite a harsh environment that they're living on, and it does provide lots of different ecosystems for different microbes. Some areas are moister than others. Other areas, there's different food supply. So say on our faces, we have lots of sebaceous glands. So the little lipophilic bacteria, so the ones that love oil, they are more likely to live there, whereas the ones that prefer the sweat, they might be found on our feet. So there's all of these variations in temperature, pH, food supply, and moisture. So we've got lots of different varieties of skin microbiome. The other two major microbiomes are at each end of our digestive tract. So we have in our mouth our oral microbiome, and at the other end of our digestive tract, right at the end in the large intestine, we have our gut microbiome. And between those two areas, say from the stomach to the end of the small intestine, it's not totally microbe free, but it certainly has nothing like the level of microbes at the two ends. And that is important for a healthy person. If the microbes get into that area in the middle, it's not so great. And you can get conditions like, you may have heard of SIBO, SIBO, which means small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So these little guys have got into our small intestine and they're creating havoc. So those are our microbiomes, and the human body used to be thought to be self-sufficient. So what I mean by that is they thought that as long as we had food to eat, we had water to drink, and we had air to breathe, the human body could create all of the chemicals it needed for survival. But they now know that that isn't true, and that we're actually very dependent on these microbes for our health and well-being. And some researchers actually believe that the health and diversity of our microbes that live with us have a bigger impact on our health and well-being than even the genes that we've inherited from our parents. So let me explain more about that idea. So as you know, we inherit our DNA from our parents, and on those DNA strands are all these little genes, thousands of genes, and each gene is like a little packet of information. It contains instructions or a recipe on how to do something or how to make something. So they're incredibly important. They're kind of like the human user manual. And so when genome sequencing became a thing, everyone working in this area got really excited, because the idea of learning more about our genes, they thought we will be able to unlock so many mysteries about our health. And we will also be able to, maybe in the future, there might be medical interventions that we could do to help protect people from disease. So it was a really exciting area of research. And at the time, it was estimated that a human cell could contain up to 100,000 different genes. Now, a couple of decades on, they've discovered two very interesting things about our human genes. Firstly, they've discovered that we only have 20 to 25,000 different genes. And this is a quarter of what they originally thought. So you could say the human cell is a little bit simpler than what we originally estimated. The other really interesting thing they found was that our genes are pretty much 99.9% identical. So all of our genes are largely identical. So my genes, your genes, the genes of someone born in an Amazonian forest that will never meet, 99.9% identical. So this was a little bit of a surprise, because even though there is truth to the fact that what we inherit from our parents can impact on our health and certainly impact on our risk of certain diseases like heart disease and certain cancers, there wasn't enough variation in our genes to account for that huge variation in our health outcomes. Something else had to be at play here. So let's now look at the genes of microbes. What they discovered when they looked at our microbial makeup, collectively, our microbes contain 7 million different genes. So that is 280 times the number of genes that a human cell has. Now, when you consider that each of those little genes is a packet of instructions, that gives you some appreciation of how versatile those microbes are. They can do many, many different jobs. They can produce many, many different things, 280 times the number that our human cells contain. And if you think of those genes like apps on your phone, so say you have a phone that has 280 times the number of apps that is on my phone, think of the cool things that you could do that I couldn't do. So you can get this idea of how clever these little microbes are. And the other thing that they discovered is that your microbiome is completely unique to you. So no one else on earth has exactly the same makeup of their microbiome as you do. And there will be microbes that we share. Without doubt, there'll be microbes that are common amongst us all, but there are some microbes that they've found in our gut that can determine where our ancestors even came from because they're unique to a particular area. So this is quite incredible, and it means that, you know, even identical twins where they have inherited the exact same DNA or the exact same genes from their parents, they actually have different microbiomes. And this has led researchers to think that maybe human beings, instead of being self-sufficient, that we're more of a social organism. So we're this mix of human and microbial cells working together. And they actually know now, and they spent a long time figuring this out, but they now know for every human cell that occupies the space of our body, there is a microbial cell. So our space of our body is made up of half human cells and half microbial cells. And these microbes, they largely use their genes for our benefit. And the reason why they do that is because we provide them with a home. We provide them with food to eat. So if they support our well-being and our health, then that ensures their survival as well. And I'll give you an example of this. So there's this little microbe, and he's got a rather complicated name, so I must admit I have been practicing this. His name is Bacteroides theta-thiomicron. I did okay. So this little guy, he's a champion carb muncher, and he has genes that code for 260 different enzymes that break down fibers from carbohydrates that our body cannot break down. So we can't produce any of these enzymes, and so therefore we cannot access the nutrients in these particular carbohydrates. Whereas this little guy, he's got genes that code for 260 enzymes that break down these resistant carbohydrate fibers and release the nutrients for our benefit. So this really shows you how useful these little guys are. And the exciting thing about this information is that this is quite empowering knowledge, because we can't do anything about the DNA that we've inherited from our parents. Our genes are static, and at this point in time, there's absolutely nothing we can do about them, but we can change our microbiome, and we can do it relatively quickly. So there's been a few studies that show that if you change your diet for the better, within 5 days, you will positively benefit your gut microbiome. So that's really quick that you can make this positive change, but equally be warned, it can go the other way as well. So we can very quickly have a negative change in our microbiome. And there's a rather famous study done by this guy, Tom Spector. So at the time, Tom was a 23-year-old genetics student, and he was very aware of this information that was around at the time that was saying that one of the important things for our health is this diversity in our microbiome. We want to have this diverse number of microbes, especially in our gut, because this enables us to have more apps. We can do more. And what they've found is that people in developing countries that are eating a more traditional diet, that are eating more whole foods, they have a lot more diversity in their processed diet. In fact, they estimate that we only have 2/3 of the diversity that someone eating a more traditional diet and leading a more traditional lifestyle would have. So he was very aware of all this information, and he wanted to find out, if he made himself the subject of an experiment, he would like to find out how much diet can impact on that diversity. So first of all, he needed a baseline. What kind of diversity did he have in his gut? So the way to do that is to send off a stool sample, because the reality is that bacteria is constantly shedding from your gut, some live, some dead. And 50 to 80% of your poop is made up of these bacteria. So you sing on it and they can tell you how many different varieties of microbes you have in your gut. And so he did this, he got a baseline, and then for the next 10 days, he ate nothing but McDonald's. 10 days of McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And at the end of that time, he sent off another stool sample to the lab, and the results he got back shocked him. In 10 days, he'd lost 40% of the diversity of microbes in his gut. And this was a huge concern. That's nearly half of them gone. And he was so surprised at this, he ended up sending 2 more samples off to 2 different labs to check the results. And sure enough, that was the fact. He'd lost nearly half of his microbial diversity. And this is still an evolving science, so they're not exactly sure the impact this has on our health, but they're wondering whether this lack of diversity, the simplification of the diversity and the loss of these apps is causing problems with autoimmune disorders, where our immune system becomes dysregulated, because if you remember, the gut is responsible for regulating our immune system. And they were really worried that it also could contribute to food intolerances, because if you imagine you might have 5 little families of microbes that are all capable of breaking down a particular food, and then something comes along that disrupts that, then what you may lose, say, 3 of those families and you're left with 2, then all of a sudden a food that you were fine digesting before becomes an issue, and you might get bloating or indigestion. So this is some of the reason why we want that diversity in our microbiome. So let's just talk about what our microbiomes do for us. One of the things they do is they regulate our immune system, and they train our immune system. So most of our immune system is found in the gut. They also in our gut, they break down food that's indigestible for us and release the nutrients. They make essential vitamins, and they make neurotransmitters. So things like serotonin, you may or may not know that 90% of serotonin, which is our happy hormone, is actually made in our gut, not our brain. They also protect us from pathogenic bacteria, so very, very crucial. And on our skin, they do a whole lot of jobs as well. Of course, they are our very first line of defense. They are our top layer of the skin's barrier function. And I don't know whether I've already said this, but one of the interesting things I found just this morning, actually, when I was reading about the skin microbiome again, is that I used to think that they only lived on the surface of the skin, but they actually don't. They are found, the skin's microbiome extends right through the epidermis, right through the dermis and right into the subcutaneous. So the microbiome goes right through the skin, and they have a very intimate relationship with our body. So our human cells can communicate with them, and our skin gets a say on who lives on the surface of our skin. So it gets to regulate what type of organisms are there. And in return, our skin's microbiome can talk to our immune system, and it can regulate its response to certain things. And it can say, hey, you need to come up here and sort out this disease producing bacteria. So it's just incredible what they can do. So these little microbes on our skin, they are very important for defense. They also eat our skin cells. So they're like our natural exfoliators. Isn't that amazing? They need our skin cells to access proteins, and they convert our sebum into a beautiful moisturizer for our skin. And there's even a little microbe that lives on our skin that can protect us from skin cancers. So it's that, and really this is the tip of the iceberg, because the research into the skin microbiome is really lagging behind the research on the gut microbiome. So I think, we need to stay up to date with this stuff. So the other thing that's quite interesting is that the skin's microbiome is as I said, it's a really harsh environment. When you compare it to the gut microbiome, it's very dry. There's not a lot of food sources there. It's not like the gut where there's this beautiful constant flow of nutrients for the microbes. So they have to live on our skin cells and our skin secretions. The other amazing thing is it's really salty. You think of the sweat that we produce and the salts in the sweat. Now, normally salts discourage microbial growth. It is a way of preserving food. So these little microbes have to evolve to live in this salty environment. And the pH of the skin isn't particularly favorable for normal microbes either. The pH of between 4.5 and 5.5 is unique to our skin's microbiome, because most disease-producing microbes love a more alkaline pH. So that's another protective mechanism. And lastly, the skin's quite a precarious little perch for these guys, because constantly those skin cells are shedding off. So they've had to evolve these little things called adherons, and they enable them to adhere or to attach to the skin surface. So our little microbes that live on our skin are tough little cookies, and they've evolved over millennia to be able to live on this rather harsh surface. And that's a good thing, because we don't want our skin to be particularly attractive to any common old microbe. I mean, this is our interface with the world. Imagine if every microbe just loved our skin, we would be a walking disease. So of course it's great that our skin is this rather unattractive environment that most disease-producing microbes kind of turn their nose up at. And our ancient old friends, which is what they call our bacteria that have learnt to live on us, they just thrive in this environment, and they're relatively hardy little guys. So the other interesting thing is that our microbiomes can actually impact upon each other. So our oral microbiome can definitely impact on our gut microbiome, and our gut microbiome can impact on our skin's microbiome. And I used to wonder, how does that happen? Because you've got a little microbe, he's living inside our body. How does he impact on a little microbe that's living on the surface of our skin? And after a little bit of study, I found out that what happens is that most of the substances that the microbes produce in our gut, we absorb into our blood as another source of nourishment. And so that will then circulate throughout our body and feed our entire body, including our skin. And this is how our gut microbes impact on our skin's barrier function, and our skin's microbiome. In fact, they've found, I was reading a book that suggested that if you take the blood cells out of the blood, that a third of the small substances or small molecules that are circulating in our blood actually come from our gut microbiome. So they have a considerable effect on our skin. And the kind of things that can happen. So if you have an unhappy gut, and you may be wondering, well, do I have an unhappy gut? Some people may be aware they'll have certain symptoms that show that they have an unhappy gut. But if you're unsure, the girls will actually pop up a link to a handout that you're welcome to have and you're welcome to share with your clients, the 7 signs that you have an unhappy gut. And they're 7 common signs that give you a red flag that potentially there's some work to be done on your gut. So you're most welcome to use that. So if you have an unhappy gut, it can impact on the skin in a number of ways. Firstly, it causes dehydration of the skin's layers. So the skin is less likely to be hydrated. And if you watched our webinar last week, or if you didn't and you want to access that, I talk a lot about the importance of the hydration of the skin and how that impacts on skin barrier function. So that's number one. Number two, it makes the skin much more sensitive to inflammation and much more reactive to the environment and anything that's put on the surface of the skin. It impacts on skin barrier function, so it weakens the skin. It is often associated with skin disorders. So I know 3 have been shown to definitely have gut connections. That's rosacea, perioral and periocular dermatitis, and eczema. They all have very direct links to the gut. And of course, having problems with gut dysbiosis can cause the skin to age. So we definitely want to keep our gut healthy. So what does a healthy gut do for our skin? Well, it stops our skin getting too thin as we age. It improves the skin's hydration, slows down transepidermal water loss. It improves the skin barrier function, makes it much less likely that you're going to get skin disorders. And of course, this really surprised me, it actually improves the skin's ability to protect itself from UV rays. So some pretty amazing things that the gut microbiome can do for our skin. So we really do want to look after our gut microbiome, and how can we do that? Well, the first thing is we need to avoid the things that can damage our gut. So as Tom Spector's experiment showed us, a lot of processed foods, takeaways, a lot of refined carbohydrates, all those kind of things are quite damaging to our gut and can reduce that diversity of that gut microbiome. The other thing that can damage the gut is a low fiber diet, because our really healthy microbes, they love fiber. It's their number one top meal choice, and they can survive for periods of time without much fiber. And what they do instead is they eat the mucosa that lines or the mucus lining of our gut. And that isn't that fabulous. I mean, we don't really want them weakening our gut surface. So it's much better to provide them with the fiber that they want. So we need a high fiber diet. The other things that can damage our gut are things like sugar. Sugar can drive the growth of bad bacteria, and artificial sweeteners are damaging. Alcohol can be damaging. So we need to limit those types of things. The other thing, what can we do positively for our gut? We can have a high fiber diet, as I suggested, and the RDI, which is the recommended daily intake, so this is the minimum amount of fiber that we should be having, is between 25 and 30 grams. And that isn't always as easy to get as what you think, because they're saying that if you have a very Western diet, the typical low fiber Western diet, we're only getting about 10 grams of fiber. So we really do need to boost up our fiber intake. And there's studies to show that even 25 to 30 grams might not be optimal. That optimal levels of fiber would be more around the 50 gram mark a day. And if you can reach this level, it hugely reduces your risk of some of the major diseases like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, that kind of thing. So we really want to aim for those really good fiber levels in our diet. The other thing we want to do is get a variety of fruit and vegetables in our diet, because every different fruit or vegetable is going to provide you with different fibers, and that will encourage different colonies of good bacteria. So it encourages variety in our gut. So if you've ever read Dr. Michael Mosley's book, Clever Guts, this is a really good read, actually. If you want a fun, easy read that really helps you understand about the gut microbiome and the importance of gut health, then get Dr. Michael Mosley's book, Clever Guts. It's excellent. And he suggests in that book that we need about 30 different fruit and vegetables a week. And that may seem a little overwhelming. It sounds like a lot, right? But the good news is that you don't have to be eating a much of a particular vegetable or fruit to be able to count it. So like one radish, you get to count as one of your varieties. So if you think about it, especially in summer, if you've got a lovely salad where you might have cucumber, capsicum, tomato, spring onions, celery, radishes, 3 types of lettuce, you know, you could easily have 10 different types of vegetables in that one meal. I think the key is to be aware of the variety you're having. We just don't want to get into the habit of having peas, carrots, and potatoes. So when you're shopping for your vegetables at your farmer's market or at your supermarket, look for ones that you haven't tried for a while, or maybe you had as a kid and you haven't had for many years, and give them a try. You know, even a mash, we can mix up, you know, mash up a whole lot of different vegetables in a mash. So try and get that variety. If that sounds a little overwhelming, one tool that we do have available to you is we have our Bestow cleansers. So these are free, they're online. We have 3 different programs. If you go to bestowcleanse.com, you will find that we have a summer cleanse, a winter cleanse, and a Love Your Gut program. And each one of those is a full-on 7-day program. They have shopping lists and prep plans and meal planners and all of these beautiful recipes. And if you fancy it and you think, well, I'm in lockdown, I might as well do something amazing for my health, you can do a full-on program. And they've even got rituals, self-care and soul care rituals that you're introduced to. So they are pretty comprehensive plans. Or if you think, no, that's all a bit much, just browse through there and get some really beautiful recipes that you can try that are really good for you, because there's nothing that's negative for your skin in these programs. So feel free, bestowcleanse.com, you can share it with your clients. They're all free. You can go in and sign up and they'll help you put these things into practice. The other great thing we can do for our gut is fermented foods. So I could talk for like half a day on fermented foods. They do so much for us. A lot of people believe that they're a great source of probiotics. So the helpful bacteria that's in them, like the lactobacillus bacteria in yogurt, that can populate our gut bacteria. Other people believe that these little bugs don't get through our stomach, but either way, they are good for our gut, because a lot of the benefit is actually in the fact that that microbe has broken down the ingredients of that food prior to you consuming it. And it acts like a beautiful fertilizer for your gut microbiome. So things like yogurt, like you're aiming for about 2 or 3 servings a day of fermented food. So for me, yogurt I have most days. And even those of you who are careful about dairy for skin disorders, quite rightly, out of all the dairy, yogurt is the one that is not a problem for skin, unless of course someone has a dairy intolerance. But of course there's other types of yogurt now as well, coconut yogurt. So yogurts, kombucha, so your fermented drinks, I will have them when I'm having an alcohol alternative. So I drink kombucha, or at the moment I'm drinking kefir soda. And the other one that I commonly use is sauerkraut. So at least once a day I'll have a tablespoon of sauerkraut, and that might be mixed into my lunch or a tablespoon on my plate with dinner. And you can count that as one of your vegetables as well, because they usually have 1 or up to 3 different vegetables in there. So that's helpful from there at that point as well. So fermented foods, and they're really easy to make. If you really enjoy eating them, you can start making them as well at home. And of course, probiotics, they're another great thing that we can have. And even though the gut research is still, there's so much to learn, they have discovered that there are certain bacteria and fungi that are particularly beneficial for our gut. So probiotics supply these and help repopulate your gut with these. And of course, if you have a sensitive gut, there are things you can take to strengthen that gut wall. So there's things like slippery elm and L-glutamine and licorice that strengthen the gut wall. And if you're wondering whether you have a sensitive gut, I always remember my mentor Jan Smith saying that if you've got a client or you may have a sensitive skin, then it's likely they've got a sensitive gut and a sensitive personality. Those three things often go together: sensitive gut, sensitive skin, sensitive personality. So you think of your eczema clients, they often have all three of those things. So if you have sensitive skin, chances are you have a sensitive gut, and you just have to care for it just that little bit more. Now, we also have another tool that you can use to look after your gut, and that is our Bestow Gut Love Plus. So this is an amazing little product. We actually started off years ago with a product called Bestow Be Cleansed, and this is a revamp on that product as we've learned more about gut health. And it contains so much. So it's got excellent sources of soluble and insoluble fiber. So the soluble fiber helps feed your beautiful little healthy microbes. They love soluble fiber, and insoluble fiber encourages elimination, because your good microbes in your gut love a clean house. So we want to encourage that elimination every day. It also contains 50% of your RDI of vitamin D. That's because vitamin D is so hard to get from our diet, and it's super important for our immunity, our bone health, and our gut health. And it contains slippery elm, L-glutamine, organic sulfur, and licorice to help soothe and heal that gut wall. And it also contains a little enzyme that breaks down digestive plaque. So you know how we have plaque on our teeth and it hides the bad bugs that cause tooth decay, and we need to get it cleaned off by the dentist? Well, apparently we have a version that lines our digestive tract as well. It's called a biofilm, and the bad bugs can use that to hide behind and elude our to hide from our immune system, and therefore our immune system doesn't know they're there and can't kill them. So this little enzyme breaks this digestive plaque down fairly quickly and exposes them, and they're able to be neutralized. And the other thing that Gut Love Plus contains is an amazing probiotic. So we were really excited when we found out that we were allowed to incorporate this particular probiotic into Gut Love Plus. It's from a company in the States called Biome, and the guy that founded Biome, Dr. Ganoom, is an expert in the gut microbial world, and he was one of the first people to discover that there are such things as probiotic fungi as well, that they're the other half of the story when it comes to helpful microbes in our gut. So the Gut Love Plus contains not only 3 probiotic bacteria that we know are good for you, but also a little probiotic fungi. And that little guy is called Saccharomyces boulardii, and he's particularly good. He's an anti-inflammatory little probiotic. He also is particularly good for acne skins. And I've learnt relatively recently that he's excellent at helping protect you if you ever have to go on antibiotics. So he has a really protective function. And if you start taking Saccharomyces boulardii when you go on antibiotics, it stops your gut microbiome being so devastated, and it also helps it recover much, much faster than normal. So that's our Bestow Gut Love Plus. It's a powerful little product. The only thing that I would say about it is start small. Just slowly introduce your gut to it, because it contains so much fiber and so many active goodies that we recommend you just start with half a level teaspoon and build up over time to a full level tablespoon. We even have someone on our team that starts with just a pinch of it. She's so sensitive to it. And the reason why is because you're giving yourself a big boost of fiber. And our good bacteria loves fiber, But of course, it produces gas as a byproduct. So if you suddenly increase the fiber intake in your diet, then these little guys, they have a party. It's like, woohoo. And they produce a lot of gas, and that can cause bloating, and it can be quite uncomfortable and quite painful when you get the gas pains. So we want to really, really slowly increase the fiber intake and make sure that we let those microbes adapt to that increased fiber. One interesting thing I have noted, and I don't have any major proof of this yet, but it's just something that I've observed, is that people that are particularly sensitive to introducing the Gut Love Plus into their diet at the beginning seem to get the best benefits from it in the long run. They seem to, when they start getting up to a full dosage, they're really feeling good. And I wonder whether those signs in the beginning where they get the bloating and the wind and that kind of thing are just a sign that they really need, that gut overhaul. So yeah, we'll watch the space. I'll be interested to find out what happens in the future. So now let's look at our skin microbiome. So the interesting thing, as we've discussed, these guys are relatively tough, and they have learnt to survive in this relatively inhospitable environment. So they're quite resilient. And when you think of all the different environments our skin's exposed to, all the different things that we do to our skin, they manage to survive quite well, and they're relatively stable, their populations. But there is a limit to this. And if they get too challenged, then this can create skin problems. And I think it's really interesting. We discussed in our last webinar about how skin disorders are becoming more and more common, and problems with skin barrier function is becoming more and more problematic. And I think, and more aggressive. And I think that maybe we've pushed our skin microbiome just that little bit too far. And I think the things we learn about our skin microbiome are really going to shape our future skincare. So what kind of things do we have to be aware of, and things we can do as skin health therapists to look after our clients' skin microbiome? Well, firstly, we know we have to consider the gut. So if you've got a client that walks in the door and they've got problems with their skin, they may have a skin disorder, then make sure you've got the tools and the knowledge to help them implement some dietary and lifestyle changes to help support their gut. I think we need to consider the gut in all skin disorders. Also, be aware that you're looking after the client's skin barrier function. So as I said, if you didn't watch that webinar, go back and have a look at it and implement those things in your work. The other thing I want to talk about is over cleaning. Now, before we get into the subject, I do just want to stress that in our post-COVID world, we do have to wash our hands. It's a fundamental hygiene principle, and it is proven to stop the spread of disease. So please don't stop washing your hands. But what I would like you to do is maybe calm down on the washing of our face and the rest of our bodies. So when it comes to our face, we are quite obsessed about cleansing. And I'm not a great believer in cleansing both morning and night, to be fair. I think at night, sure, you will have makeup, sunblock chemicals on your skin, pollutants on your skin. By all means, clean that off. But in the morning, do we really need to cleanse? We might have some perspiration, some dust, some traces of our night product. Maybe we could just rinse with water, and that's going to remove the perspiration, it's going to remove the dust and traces of our night product. We could even wipe with a cloth, and that will remove excess sebum, but it means we don't completely remove that acid mantle that protects our skin microbiome, and we don't remove absolutely all of that sebum, which they are relying on as well. Also, not a fan of foaming cleansers, never have been. They really do just strip off that acid mantle completely. Definitely not a fan of soaps. Soaps, their very nature suggests that they have to be alkaline in order to work. And of course, disease-producing bacteria love an alkaline environment, and our little buddies that are living on our skin, they hate it. They want the acidity. So soaps not only completely obliterate our acid mantle, but they also change the pH of our skin as well. And as for antibacterial washes, I mean, what were they thinking? Fine for your hands, but does our face need an antibacterial wash? If you have healthy skin, in light of all this knowledge that we have now about the skin microbiome, why would we want to remove 99.9% of the bacteria there? The simple fact that they live there means that if a disease-producing bacteria comes along, he's going to have to compete with them for space and resources. If they're not there, we're wide open to infection. So I'm not a fan of using antibacterial washes on the face if you have healthy skin. And I'm not really a big fan of it on the body as well. In fact, when it comes to washing the body, I believe you should only wash your important places, which are under the arms and the groin and potentially the feet. And the reason why is because under the arms and the groin, you have these glands called apocrine glands, and they secrete a sticky, milky substance that needs to be broken down by soap or body wash. Otherwise, the microbes that live there will convert it into body odor. And those are the only places you get body odor. If I said, do you smell a body odor? You're not going to smell your arms and go, no, I'm fine. You smell under your arms. So wash those areas. The rest of your body, just rinse with water. The moment you step in the bath or shower, normal perspiration will just rinse away. And of course, it leaves that beautiful sebum on our skin. And you'll find that your skin, if you do this, then you'll find you don't smell a body odor and your skin will be much happier. You won't have to constantly protect it with moisturizer, even though that's still a good idea, but you'll find it much, much easier to look after. Yeah, so just wash your important places. The other thing that I would say is make sure you are not deficient in essential fatty acids. So make sure you are having good forms of essential fatty acids in your diet. I know those of you who know me know I'm obsessed with essential fatty acids. I will admit that. They do so much for our skin. So what do they do for our microbiome? Well, firstly, they support our skin barrier function. They're absolutely essential for skin barrier function. They, in fact, if scientists want to create an impaired skin barrier function, they do it simply by eliminating all essential fatty acids from the diet. And bingo, they have an impaired skin barrier function that they can now test out various things on. So we need them for that. They also will be incorporated, EFAs will be incorporated into the sebum that your skin produces, and that produces a beautiful quality fat for those little microbes to eat. You know, give them a break. They need good food. They don't get a heck of a lot of it up there. It also helps stop blockages. So it keeps the sebum running, moving, and prevents comedones. And as soon as you get a blockage, you can get an imbalance in the skin's microbiome. So we can get an overgrowth of P. acnes and you have problems. The other thing that EFAs do is they maintain the pH of the skin, because, and it's the clues there in the name, essential fatty acids. So having EFAs in our diet is really important to maintain that perfect pH of 4.5 to 5.5. And of course, the important thing to remember is that you need the right EFAs. Those of you who know me will know I'm not a fan of capsules. They just don't give you enough. It doesn't matter how strong they are. A tablespoon of liquid oil is much, much easier digested. It's 100% better digested than a capsule, and it contains the same amount of oil as 8 to 14 capsules, depending on their strength. So get a liquid oil. Also remember, you need a good quality oil, because essential fatty acids are very delicate and they require they need to be protected from heat, light and oxygen. So you need an EFA that's been cold pressed. It has to be bottled in the dark, so it can't be exposed to light. It needs to be protected from oxygen. So you need a really good quality one, and you need one that has been formulated for skin. And this is really, really important, because there's two families of fats, omega-3s and omega-6s, and between them there's probably approximately 10 different fats in those, and between those two families, and they all do positive things for our body, but in particular there are certain ones that work with the skin, and a lot of the EFAs that are on the market have very low levels of those ones, and there's a big reason why, and that's in my last webinar, but we need an EFA that's been developed for skin. And so that's why my go-to is the Bestow Beauty Plus oil. Absolutely every single client could do with this, and it does all of those beautiful things for our skin microbiome and our skin's barrier function, and plenty more on top of that. It's a really good quality oil. It's liquid, so you do need to mix it into food. That will make it much easier to digest, so you need to mix it into cool or warm food. So those are all the things we can do for our gut and skin's microbiome. I think be aware that a lot of skin disorders are now being associated with imbalances in the skin microbiome. So rosacea, sebderm, perioral, eczema, acne have all been shown to have an imbalance in the makeup of the skin microbiome. So it's a really important area for us to watch. We need to stay abreast of it as skin health therapists. And for all of our stockists, I promise I'll stay abreast and keep you informed of that. Yeah, and I think it's really going to change the way we look at skin health in the future. So yeah, has anyone got any questions about this subject?
Hi, Janine. Sorry, couldn't unmute quick enough. That has been amazing. You've answered a lot of the questions as we have been going, which has been fantastic. I am going to ask you one of the questions, but if it does require a little bit more of a detailed response, then we can also get back to them at a later time as well. So they just would like you to share some wisdom around IBS, fibre and the Gut Love Plus.
Okay, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, a rather tricky condition to treat, mainly because it's different for everyone. You know, a lot of disorders, there's some really obvious protocol that you can follow and rely on, where IBS, different things seem to work for different people. So there's also the element that they think that is that there's a degree of our emotions that are linked into the development of IBS as well. So it is a complicated one. The thing that I would say, some people find that a high fiber diet works for them. Other people find that they're better with a low fiber diet. The FODMAP diet works quite well, which is where you, for a period of time, you eliminate high fiber diets, but you can't stay on that forever because, of course, fiber is important for our health, our gut health. So regarding Bestow Gut Love Plus, it depends on how much support that person is getting. I really think that help with either the doctor, their naturopath or nutritionist is important, and you can work in with them. When it comes to the Gut Love Plus, I think just trial it in really small amounts and just see what the body has to say about that. So that might mean selling your client sample sizes instead of the full size, and just try small amounts and just see what happens. That's the best advice I can give, because it's just so different for everybody, really. It is a tricky disorder to treat. So hopefully that answers that question.
Perfect. The other one is with people with histamine issues that have difficulty breaking down supplements such as collagen and fermented supplements. How can they sort of, what could you suggest?
So histamine is a tricky one, because there are some fermented foods that contain a lot of histamine, and so they do need to stay away from that. I haven't got a lot of knowledge on this subject, to be fair, but I remember I watched years ago, well, a few years ago, a whole series of seminars on fermented food, and they actually discussed this particular subject. So I will just go back through my resources and see if I can find that link to give to you. I actually downloaded some PDFs on it because it was quite interesting, but I must admit it's not something that I feel confident to give advice on. So let me see if I can find some resources and we can get back to the person that asked that question.
Perfect. I think you've answered everything else. Everyone has just, thank you so much for your amazing knowledge. They've all really enjoyed it. Everyone's rushing back to get their Bestow Beauty Oil and Gut Love Plus off their shelves if they don't already have that. And I think that we might just answer, there's a few other questions that might need a bit more detailed responses, so we might answer those privately. We'll send everyone an email if we haven't got back to them. But thank you so much, Janine. Again, you are amazing as always, a wealth of knowledge. We learned so much from you. But if anyone does have any other questions, if you do want to pop them down, we can respond to you privately as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. It's very appreciated.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Janine.
See you.
All the best. Take care.
You too. Bye.